Good morning and welcome to another episode of Steelers Morning Rush. It is Tuesday, September 3rd, 2024. It's game week. We made it. The Pittsburgh Steelers are playing the Atlanta Falcons in Atlanta this Sunday. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching to the Steelers Morning Rush podcast, the Steelers Morning Drive podcast. I'm Alan Saunders, and I really appreciate each and every one of you. We've had a great reaction, and we made it to game week. I'm still working through how we're going to do game weeks here. It wasn't something I really thought about when we started this podcast, so I don't know. I'll figure it out as we go. Let me know if you guys have something specific you'd like me to touch on every week or something like that. But right now, I'm just going to talk about something that I was on the radio last night on Sirius XM talking about previewing the season, and it was asked a question about Arthur Smith and specifically about the way, the fantasy football universe sort of collectively decided that Arthur Smith was the bad guy last season in Atlanta. And the way I think that's sort of skewed his perception around NFL circles since then. Arthur Smith is a creative guy, and he certainly tried to find ways to get different players the football in different circumstances. I think that's one of the reasons that the fantasy football community really did not like him, is that, in fantasy football, they want the stars to get the points, right? And people got upset about his perceived lack of usage of Bijan Robinson, of Drake London, of Kyle Pitts, and his inability to get those guys into the end zone. And, I do think it was not a very well-conceived offense in Atlanta. They didn't have very good quarterback play. They didn't have very good offensive line play. But the part about the touchdowns is the interesting thing to me, right? Is the last year in Atlanta, Michael Pruitt had one touchdown, Cordell Patterson had one touchdown, Scotty Miller had two touchdowns, and Drake London had two touchdowns. Jonnu Smith had three, and Kyle Pitts had three. And so there's this clear pattern of guys that are not necessarily the stars getting open and getting those red zone looks. And while I understand why you would be frustrated from that from a fantasy football perspective, it's hard to argue that that's a bad thing from a football perspective, right? What you're seeing is an offensive coordinator that is showing the creativity and the inspiration to get guys that are not as good open in difficult to score areas of the field. Look at what the Steelers did last year. 5 touchdowns for George Pickens, 5 touchdowns for Diontate Johnson, 2 for Pat Freiermuth, 1 for the entire rest of the offense. That's Calvin Austin, at least in terms of receiving. So yeah, it's better to be able to scheme guys open that aren't necessarily overwhelmingly talented. It's better to be able to go against your tendency and have a change-up that works. And I think the Steelers, we've talked a lot about, they don't have that many playmakers. Well, yeah, when they get down the red zone, when you don't have to defend depth, what happens when you get to the red zone? The defense starts to get condensed. If it's 1st and 10 at the 50-yard line, the safeties are 12 yards off the ball. If it's 1st and 10 at the 1, the safeties are 5 yards off the ball, maybe 6, because there's no sense in defending out the back of the end zone. They start to condense the defense. It's a lot easier to double cover players. So you're going to see 2 guys on George Pickens. You're going to see 2 guys on Pat Freiermuth. There is nobody out there that is going to take away from those coverages. Maybe the running game. But I think you're going to see a lot of coverage against, very specifically, Pickens and Freiermuth. The Steelers are going to need – it's not going to be this thing where you're going to be like, why will the Steelers playmakers get more touches? Pat Freiermuth and George Pickens are going to be standing on the sideline every defensive possession with their head down like this, like, oh my God, they're going to throw it to us 7 more times. I know. Right? They don't need the stars to get more touches in this offense. They only have 2 receiving stars, and they're going to have more than they can handle. I'm sure of it. What they really need is the ability to scheme guys that aren't that good into open looks. Guys like Roman Wilson, Calvin Austin, Van Jefferson, guys like Connor Hayward and Michael Pruitt, Darnell Washington. And Atlanta very knowingly did that all last season, especially in the red zone. So I think I'm not saying you shouldn't be concerned about the wide receiver position. I'm just saying I think Arthur Smith's previous tendencies line up very well with what the Steelers' needs are from a personnel standpoint. They're going to need someone that is creative enough to get some of these guys that are second-tier options open so that they can take some of the heat off of George Pickens and Pat Freiermuth. And I think Arthur Smith has the ability to be that guy. Now, they're going to have to get into the red zone consistently for that to work. They're still going to have to run the ball, still going to have to use play action, still going to have to protect Russell Wilson. It's not this, cure-all, right? But I do think that there is very specifically in the red zone good reason to think that Arthur Smith can work with this collection of players the way it's the way it's currently lined up, just because of his experience and his past and what he's done before. They're still not overwhelmingly talented. Let's be real. But I do think that's an interesting thing that maybe as we were talking about the wide receiver discussion, not getting Brandon Aiyuk and then not getting Noah Brown or anyone else, that probably got swept under the rug a little bit is that Arthur Smith has done this before. He's done it when he didn't have to do it. Now he's going to have to do it, but I think he can do it. And that is certainly an interesting part of what we're going to see going forward. Going to talk more about the Falcons, I think, as we go forward through the week. Mike Tomlin talks today at noon. I'm sure we'll get his perspective on things. We'll do this again tomorrow and the rest of the week. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Make sure you click that bell for notifications here on the YouTube platform so you don't miss an episode of Steelers Morning Rush, Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'll be back with Zachary Smith later today after practice, so stick around for that. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.